Hi, I'm Lou Scott, and this is the Geppetto Room, where you don't have to be creative to be creative. You just have to be you. Now let me explain that. In your brain, in this 3-pound piece of gray matter in your head right now, there are 10 to 15 billion neurons. They're capable of combinations to 10 of the 800th power. Now let me tell you what that means. If you take 10 and multiply it 800 times, you create one large, very big number, okay? And that's the ability of your brain to make combinations. Now, I don't know about you, but I know that I don't use all that brain power. And this show is going to share ideas about how we can expose those kind of brain powers so we can do transformative thinking. That's what we're here for. Now, the point about the ability of transformative thinking, so forth, science tells us that there are probably 100 billion stars in our galaxy. They think that our brain has the combination ability, actually, to exceed that. So that's a lot of power, okay? And we're going to talk about that power right here. I'm going to use before that, when you think about it, your question is, why do you have to make transformative decisions? Well, let me answer that question. Einstein said it the best. He said you can't solve new problems with old ideas because the old ideas probably created the new problems in the first place. In today's world, you have to do transformative thinking. Why is that also? Look at and I'm talking about thinking not just to create art, the thinking that you're going to use decisions to make business decisions, family decisions, economic decisions. As Vermonters, we have many things to deal with. We have a drug problem. We have a demographic problem. Our youth is leaving. To solve these problems, we're going to have to use transformative thinking. And again, that's what this show is all about. I'm going to use my work, okay, as visual aids to demonstrate to you how you can expand the brain to create new pathways. Now, with those new pathways will be you make transformative decisions. I may talk to you about the various pieces, how I did it and so forth, but at one point in time, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop and say, this is a Geppetto moment. These are the moments that activities and processes I want you to keep in mind because that's what's going to help you make a transformative idea. Remember that when I talk to the Geppetto moment, those are the important things you want to take away from this particular show. The whole show is about developing transformative thinking. That's what it's about, not my art. Transformative thinking. I'm going to share what I know about making good decisions, transformative decisions. Let's go to the first piece. This piece I call 25 billion horses of a different color. Now let me tell you the story about that. Because of new telescopes and new things in the sky and so forth, science tells us that in our galaxy alone, there are 25 billion planets possible to be what they call exoplanets, meaning that those planets could have life. Maybe not life like us, but life. 25 billion. And that's only in our galaxy. Now, when you look at other galaxies, the galaxies are trillions of galaxies. That, in a way, scares me. You know why it scares me? Because we can't even get along with ourselves, this handful of ethnic groups. And just imagine if we had to deal with thousands of people. That's the story of this piece. I used colored balls for a sign. I don't know why I used the horses itself, but the idea of horses of a different color appealed to me. Now, here's the Geppetto moment. How did I get this idea? I read it. But I read in a specific way. Think about this. I only read nonfiction. I read books that I have no idea possibly what I'm reading, okay? I don't understand. For example, I might read a physics book. I don't understand physics. But while fanning through that book or that magazine, I will come across an idea. I'm expanding the pathways in my brain. That's what I did here. When I read also, I read table of contents. Let me explain what that means. I read the table of contents, and I only pick out the chapters that I think are relevant to what that interests me, okay? Most books have a lot of fill. I look at the chapters. Sometimes I read the whole book, sometimes I don't. I read a lot of magazines. I wander around the library, wander around a bookstore. It's amazing how many magazines there are. Everything from chairs to televisions, you name the subject. Even if you don't have any interest in that subject. The idea that you fanning the magazines, looking at the information, again, expands the mind. That's how I got the idea. I read it. Let's go to the second piece. This piece represents an interesting story, a Buddhist story. And let me tell you that story. This one individual who's seeking knowledge goes into the mountains and is looking for a monk or a guru to give him new wisdom, and he finds one. And the monk invites him into his cabin and begins to serve tea. This individual starts to talk about his background, his education, what he did, his accomplishments, and the monk doesn't say anything, he just keeps pouring the tea until the tea overflows. Man steps back. What are you doing? He says, well, this tea overflowing represents your mind. You have come here for wisdom, but all you're telling me is your old wisdom. There's no room, like this key cup, no room for new stuff. That's the Geppetto moment. You have to empty. You want to have transformative thinking? This is what you do. You get all the data you need to solve a particular problem, whatever that problem might be. And then forget it. Forget it. Empty. Play golf. Take a walk in the woods. Get involved in your hobby. Do whatever you can do, but don't think about that particular solution. The solutions will come. If you empty, that's another Geppetto moment. The second one, empty. After you discuss all the things that you know about that particular problem, that problem will be solved in a transformative way, I assure you. Let's go to the third piece. I read an article that talked about what would happen if the Earth lost its atmosphere. It's very dire. I tried to do a piece that represented our responsibility for climate change and how we have to preserve our environment. But listen to the story that the scientists, I was reading. If the Earth begins to lose its atmosphere, the first thing that happens is there's no sound. You can't talk because sound cannot travel in a vacuum. It needs a medium, and air is that medium. So there's no sound. There also is no light. I don't understand why, but the sun doesn't shine if we lose our atmosphere. So now it's dark and quiet. A third thing is all the water on the Earth will evaporate, begin to evaporate, and then freeze. So you end up with a world that's dark and quiet. Now, how did I get the idea? Transformative idea. I was walking downtown in Rutland among our galleries. We have 7 galleries that are managed by a company called Art is Vital. In fact, we have the curator today to talk with us. I was walking around. Why is art important? Because artists, by nature, reach for transformative things. They want change. Well, we may fear change. They want change. So by looking at art, not decorative art that has symbols, art that has something that turns you on, gives you a spiritual feeling, that's the kind of art that makes you think better. That's the kind of art that you want to surround yourself with, because that's the kind of art that will make you make better decisions, transformative decisions. And that's what you have to make today. And that's how I got this piece. If you look at the piece, obviously the symbols are simple. You're looking at dark earth, you're looking at, so the one thing that was curious to me was, why did I choose the idea of a wolf baying at the moon? Every time I heard a wolf baying at the moon, it's sorrowful. It's a sorrowful thing. And let me tell you something, if we don't preserve our environment, it will be a sorrowful thing. And that's where I got the image. That's where I got the kind of concept and so forth. So that's the 3 Geppetto moments, and which we're going to repeat later on. Right now, what I'd like to do is introduce you to an artist, a foremost artist. He spent 35 years teaching at Castleton. His name is William Ramage, and so forth. And we're going to try to probe him to find out how he generates ideas, how he creates his art. So that's what we're going to do, and we're going to interview him, and we're going to see if he can share ideas that we can use to make transformative decisions. I don't want to embarrass you. Thanks for coming. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
I don't want to embarrass you, but spend just a few moments telling me about your background.
I'm not sure what that question means.
Well, your education, you're telling me art you did. Art is Vital, you're running Art is Vital downtown. There are 7 galleries, you're running those.
Right. Well, in terms of being an artist, I've never wanted to do anything else. I pretty much made up my mind when I was 7 that this was what I was going to do. I took every art class you could when I was in public school. I went to a professional art school, then it was called the Philadelphia Museum College of Art, where I got a BFA. Then I went to UMass Amherst and got an MFA. And then I taught for 3 years at Ohio State. I was there during the riots in 1970. And then I came to Vermont. And 5 years later, I started teaching at Castleton, and I taught there for 35 years. And now I'm retired, and I'm in the business of trying to make art as vital as I can for the city of Rutland. That's kind of it in a nutshell.
Okay. Let me ask you something. You told me, I want to question you about how you as an artist, and I think a really good one, I've seen his work and so forth, and everybody else has seen it worldwide, is how you create ideas, how you make these transformative decisions. And let me tell you what, one time you told me, you said, when I asked you that question, you said to me, you never choose the first idea. What do you mean by that?
Well, you have to look at, one of the things about art that's different than most other enterprises is that they sort of focus in at a thing and try to nail it down. With art, it's always exploratory. There's this thing, and then you start reaching out for other ideas or thoughts that could come. So say this is the original thought, and then all of a sudden you're comparing it to as many thoughts. And so the activity is basically a thought evolving. Jansen, who wrote the most used art history book, in the beginning of his art history book says, making art's not like what most people think of as making. The artist never really knows what he's done until he's done it. He describes it as it's like a game of hide and seek where the seeker doesn't know what he's looking for until he's found it. Interestingly enough about art, as soon as you know what you're doing, it is no longer exploratory and it becomes useless. So it really is constantly, you come up with a thought and then you just constantly explore as many possibilities around that thought as possible. It's part of, I honestly believe that nature, for whatever reason, produced 2% of the species are visual thinkers. I call them visual thinkers. They're sort of non-linear thinkers. Most people are more linear in the way they string thoughts together. Artists are definitely non-linear thinkers, but it's not visual thinkers. I'm going to call them visual thinkers, but it's not only artists, it's also scientists, it's also accountants, it's also, I don't know if you know, but the Associate Supreme Court Justice in the Vermont Supreme Court, Maryland's, I'll never pronounce her name right, Skoglund, was an art major when she was an undergraduate. You just sort of process information in a different way, again, in a nonlinear way. I think one of the reasons why art is so important to the culture is that this kind of thinking, Lou calls it transformative, but it even sort of transcends just being transformative. It's just another way to put information together. Like, I always wonder, there's a guy who invented what they call superconductivity. This is a way that you can conduct electricity more effective. Clay, he found out that clay was a much better conductor of electricity than copper. Where the hell did that idea come from? Clay. So, you know, again, it's not, it's sort of non-linear. It's more taking things apart and re-examining the parts and then trying to put them together in a new way.
You asked where that idea comes from. That's what I want to ask you. Where does the artist, where do you get the inspiration for a particular idea, to a beginning of an idea, before you start to put all the forms together?
Well, you know, it's interesting. This is sort of a roundabout way to answer that question. A lot of people don't know that every year all these young people go to college to be art majors. And, you know, they've been advised by their parents, their uncles, their cousins, everybody not to do that. But they have to do it anyway. And so they basically realize that in order for them to get a good education, they have to basically pursue that kind of thinking. But even though they are visual thinkers, over 80% of all art majors from all colleges, whether it's a professional art school or a prestigious institution, big university, small private school, state college, 80% plus never make art after they graduate. And they tried to find out, well, what is the common denominator of this 15, 17, 18% of people who persist? And they looked at sociological things, economic things, they couldn't find anything that sort of made them a group until they realized that these are the people who can't not do it. They just can't not do it. So you have this thing that you have to do. And so what you do is, and again, it's not like you're building a house or you know, one of the things that's crazy about art is it's absolutely useless. I mean, you can't store food in it, you can't drive to work in it, you can't hang clothes on it, you can't sit on it. It's useless stuff. The only thing that makes it vital is that it is an interesting thought brought to fruition. So what these people who have to make art do is they have to perpetually explore their brains for interesting thoughts. And it's not automatic. It's not like it comes out of the sky or the muse comes and taps you on your head. It is hard work. You sit there and
you have to find new pathways.
Well, again, you come up with this idea and then you try to explore its values. And in the process, it can become an interesting conversation, or it can be not so interesting, you know.
So we're very curious, the idea that most art students never really fulfill art, but the art background, the appreciation of art, creates in them an ability to think, make decisions in their other occupations.
Again, it's, you know, people who are nonlinear thinkers can bring all kinds of very special skills to almost any enterprise. For one thing about art, since you never really know what you're doing, you have to become comfortable with ambiguity and uncertainty. Most people are not comfortable with ambiguity and uncertainty.
Let me ask you something about, you said it about, last question about, you keep saying nonlinear thinking. What do you mean by that?
Well, that's one of the things that's...
it's not easy to answer.
It's not easy to answer. Well, you know, linear thinking is kind of a construct that sort of controls the way you think. Nonlinear thinking is much more abstract. It's not like a sentence, you know. A sentence is weird. Like I can say, that is a camera. And that is a camera. 4 words. That's instant. That's not 4 words. It's right there. I can't say that's a camera without saying that's a camera, but I know without saying it, without giving it that. It is.
Nonlinear.
So so if you approach everything that way, it's just, you know, art is really, I want to go back to art being important. At the end of the millennium, and scientists, I believe that Steve Jobs was a nonlinear visual thinker. There's so many people out there. Einstein was a non-linear thinker, a visual thinker. At the end of the millennium, I think it was Time magazine picked 10 people from each of the centuries of the second millennium that made the most significant contribution. And of course, Einstein, a non-linear thinker in the 20th century, was the #1 person in the 20th century. You go back to the 14th century, the beginning of humanism, And the most significant contributor was an artist, a guy named Giotto, who painted pictures on the walls of old Romanesque. And he was also a nonlinear thinker. So I mean, he made the most significant contribution in changing the way the world thought about itself, as did Michelangelo, as did Picasso. I mean, they just sort of restructure the way the culture puts information together. It's just so interesting.
When I think of transformative, when I think of transformative thinking, I think that you have to create new pathways, and you do that in a nonlinear way by exposing yourself to art, by reading it a particular way, exposing it to new information, because again, you can't solve new problems with old ideas. Thanks,
Right.
Bill.
You're welcome.
I appreciate what
My
you
pleasure.
did.
I hope it made sense.
Thank you. It was very helpful. Thanks very much. Let me close by saying this, by quoting Plutarch, actually a very old writer, who said, and I'll read it, "The mind is not a vessel to be filled, but a fire to be ignited." Listen to that, a fire to be ignited. And how do we ignite it? We ignite it with transformative thinking. Now today, we had three Geppetto moments. Reading, the way I described reading, visiting art places, and what Bill was saying about art, how it stimulates you to make transformative thinking, and empty. All the data in your mind, put all the data in your mind, and then forget it, and the ideas will come, okay? So, let me end this way. If you have any ideas for me that you can share with people, send them to me. Send them to me, please. Ideas of how you generate transformative thinking. Or if you're interested in how I build my dioramas or write the narrative, please send that to me and we'll share that with them. And I will answer every email that you send. So thank you for the time you spent. I hope it's valuable, and I'll see you next time.